Hey everybody, it's Emily at Arc Schooling, and it's time to talk about what I read in the month of April. I almost said May. So let's talk about what I read in April. Start with my stats. I read 12 books in total. 8 of them I listened to as audiobooks. 2 were ebooks. I read 10 books that I actually physically owned. I read 2 arcs. I had a whopping 9 5-star reads this month. I didn't DNF anything, which is weird. I had 2 books that were rereads. I read 6 new releases. Quite a bit of YA in middle grade. I read 5 books that would qualify for that. 1 nonfiction. And so I had what I would consider a pretty solid reading month, even though technically I didn't get to everything I wanted to. It's fine. So let's just get into it. I'm going to start with HalfLife by Jillian Cantor. Was the ARC Booked Book Club selection for March, but I technically finished it in April, so it counts as an April read. This was a historical fiction / alternate history about Marie Curie and what her life might have looked like had she chosen a different path and married somebody else and stayed in Poland. So I love stuff like this. It's so interesting to me because I'm a big fan of like the idea of parallel universes and like alternate realities. And like if I'd made this choice, what would my life have looked like? So like this is right up my alley. And it's Jillian Cantor, who I love her writing style. She writes some really interesting books. This was great. I really enjoy reading about women in science and seeing like all of the amazing things she did. What would it have looked like if she had married someone who was, I don't want to say less supportive, but more focused on like, well, you're married now and you're going to have children and you're going to be a mother. Like, what more do you need? That kind of thing. Like, and how that became a bit of a hindrance on her career and like how not. And she in this other reality still interacts with Pierre Curie, and she still has like this devotion to science and learning, but she's not been able to reach her full potential. And I just thought that was really interesting to read about. And I gave that 5 stars. I read The Trouble with Secrets by Naomi Milliner, and this I had as an arc. This is a middle grade contemporary story. And we're following 12-year-old Becky, who is preparing for her bat mitzvah, and she is feeling insecure about it because her older siblings, she thought, did such an amazing job. Her father is the rabbi, so she feels this pressure that she has to be amazing, and she just doesn't feel like she is. The only thing she sees herself good at is playing the flute. And this story is about sister relationships and family and the danger of keeping secrets. It starts with her band teacher telling her that she should audition for the all-county band. It's kind of like an honor, and you know, it's hard to get in. And she wants to know if she's good enough. And she asks her parents, because she has to have a signed permission form to audition. And her father says no, because he thinks she needs to be putting more focus on preparing for her bat mitzvah, and that this will take away from that. The bat mitzvah is a once-in-a-lifetime thing where all county band will be there next year. And so she decides to forge her mother's signature and audition anyway without telling them, because she just needs to know, is she good enough? So she is keeping this secret from her parents, and her sister finds out. She really looks up to her older sister Sarah, and she is like this Broadway superstar, like really good at singing and acting, and she's starring in the school's production of Les Miserables. And Becky finds out that her sister, who she thinks of as this perfect good girl, is also keeping a secret. And okay, this is where I'm going to warn you because I don't feel like the synopsis of this book sets you up for what you're about to read and experience. This book Bridge to Terabithia'd me and I wasn't ready for it. This is an incredibly sad story. And I want you to know that going in. I don't know why that isn't made more explicitly clear in the synopsis, because I feel like this is really a story about grief and all of the things that come with it. This book doesn't hit that moment until like 70% in, but once you get there, it will ruin you. I loved the characters in this book. I thought they were really well written. I was really intrigued by the consequences of keeping the secret from her. I really thought it was going to go a different direction though. So I'm not going to spoil what happens specifically, but just know that there is a death in the story and then everyone is like dealing with it for the rest of the book. And I will say it does have these small little intermission chapters called Now throughout the beginning of the book that kind of hint at something bad happening, but never says what it is. And I figured it out. I don't know, at the halfway point, I was like, wait, is that what we're about to do? I don't know that a child would figure that out. So I think they should know going in, based on my experience with my own children and how different kids reacted to reading Bridge to Terabithia without knowing what was going to happen. So I think you should be informed that this book deals with the death of a sibling and that it is very sad. I cried for the last 30% of the book. Just I could not get it under control. Every time I thought I'd calm down, I'd come back to the book and instantly start crying again. So it is sad. So be ready for that. This is also a very Jewish book. We are dealing with a character who is preparing for her bat mitzvah. There's a lot of talk about what that entails and talk about doing a mitzvah project. And there's a very major, a big storyline in this book has to do with the idea that Jews should not marry outside of their faith. And what does it mean if they do? And should you not go full in on a relationship if it's with somebody who's not a Jew? And if you do, what are the consequences of that? And there's a lot of stuff in the plot about that. I disagree strongly with that concept, especially when it's a girl character dealing with it, because the idea behind, and I never experienced this when I was growing up. I grew up in a more conservative, bordering on reform synagogue. And so it was never my parents would have been thrilled if I married a Jew, but it was never you have to. In this story, I don't know. I don't think they're Orthodox. The vibes I was getting was this was a conservative family, but maybe it was Orthodox. I don't know. I don't have experience with Orthodox Judaism, but it was made very clear that they strongly believed that Jews should marry Jews because we don't want to lose more Jews. We want to grow the Jewish community, not diminish it. And the idea here being that if you marry outside of Judaism, your children will be Jews, which is confusing because the way Judaism works is it's matrilineal. So if you are a woman and you have children, your children are Jews. So what do you mean? I was baffled by that a little bit. I can understand, I knew interfaith people growing up. My kids are interfaith. So I didn't quite get that. That is a big part of the book. So I ended up giving this 5 stars though, because the way I see it, if a book can make me that emotional, it's earned a 5-star for me. And I did sob my way through the end of this book. So I may go back later and downgrade it just because it did bother me that I wasn't prepared for what was going to happen. And maybe that was part of what hit so hard. But also I did really enjoy the story. until it hurt me. So I tentatively am giving it 5 stars. And my 3-word review was how dare you, because I wasn't ready. I just finished Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. This is by Clay McLeod Chapman, and oh my goodness, I have to talk about it. This is horror, and I'm not going to recommend this to everybody because I think this is a niche audience. I'm going to start by saying I enjoyed this. I had a good time reading it. But I'm going to follow that up with saying it was so gross. This is a book that made me like do this the whole time I was reading it. I was just like, ugh. So this is following a man named Noah Fairchild, and his parents have been kind of going off the deep end for a while. He lives in New York City. They live like just north of Richmond, I think. He's losing his parents to right-wing news, and they are becoming more and more paranoid, and after not being able to get in contact with them for a few days, he becomes concerned, and he wants to go check on them and make sure they're okay. And when he gets there, they are very much not okay. Like, they have become these feral, like, mindless zombies who are just completely deranged. And he kind of freaks out, and the story goes from there. And you end up following his brother and sister-in-law and their family, and seeing the ways in which they were all, like, sucked into this zombifying right-wing media thing. And like, the husband got sucked into the news, which they call fax news. He got sucked into the news stuff, and the wife gets sucked into, like, you know, the wellness crunchy mama kind of stuff. She gets like sucked into that. The son gets sucked into like the online challenges and like social media and that kind of thing. And they just devolve into these like mindless zombies who do terrible things to each other, to other people. And like, it reminded me a lot of Stephen King's book, Cell. And it was kind of a similar idea. In Cell, Stephen King was writing a commentary on how we're also like absorbed in our phones, that we become zombies. This was kind of like that, except focused on like right-wing media and how that specifically like changes people's brains and makes them into somebody who you never thought they could become, or, you know, that sort of thing. Like the right-wing zombie cult, basically. It was really, like, I don't want to say this was like a thought-provoking, like, I learned something kind of book, but it did make me stop and think, like, we're all susceptible to propaganda. We're all susceptible to getting sucked into things like this because people want to be a part of something. I think that's kind of what he's trying to say here. Like, we want to be a part of something so much that we're willing sometimes to become a part of something negative if it means we're part of the group. So, anyway, super gross. I laughed. I gagged. I had a good time reading it. I couldn't put it down. I gave this 4 stars. And if you're into horror, weird political commentary, you don't mind gross scenes. Like, there are some really gross scenes in this book. If you don't mind that, you might enjoy this. So, my 3-word review was just WTF, because I can't say I've read anything quite like this before. So I did a video in which I read 3 books that I was like really anticipating for a while, like so excited to read. And in that video, I read Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. It absolutely lived up to its potential. This was such a good addition to the Hunger Games universe. Part of me wants to have a book about everyone. Like, I want a Finnick book, I want a Joanna book, like, I want a Mags book, I want to know about everyone's backstory, but like, obviously, it can become redundant if she just does everyone's games. Like, I don't necessarily need to know about the games. What I loved learning about was this like deepening of the universe, because we got to see characters we've met before in like a different perspective, because like when you read the Hunger Games, you're only seeing things through Katniss, so like you're seeing it through her eyes, and other characters may view things differently. They may interact with people differently and understand things in a different way, and I loved Haymitch. I mean, I love Haymitch as a character. He's one of my favorite characters in the Hunger Games. And so getting to see his backstory and how he got to where we meet him in the Hunger Games, well, it puts that book in a whole different, like, light. You see things differently going back. I've yet to finish my reread, but, like, just thinking about, like, what we know about characters. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not going to, but, like, if you're a fan of the Hunger Games and you enjoy Haymitch as a character, I think you should read this. Even if you don't like Haymitch that much, like, this book, it's so good. It's so good. I gave it 5 stars. Also in that video, I read Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix, and it absolutely was what I wanted it to be. And I gave it 5 stars. Like, it's, when I tell you I had a great reading month, I read some really great stuff. Witchcraft for Wayward Girls is a story set in the 1970s, and we're following this group of girls who are unwed mothers. They're pregnant, and their parents send them to this home where they live out their pregnancy, give birth, give that baby up for adoption, and then they go home and act like it never happened. Like, when they're in this home, they're given different names so that none of them know who they really are. And it's like this weird liminal space where you don't exist. It just, you're here until you're done being pregnant, and then you can go home and imagine that this was just some make-believe. It never happened, and get on with your life. And this book was heartbreaking. Like, I was so angry at the adults in this story because they were so cruel to these girls and treated them as if they did it on purpose, as if they are these wanton women who chose to get pregnant, and hate that, but loved this book. In this story, we're following these girls, and they meet a woman who can give them some power with a price. And are they willing to pay the price? This book was everything I wanted it to be. I love Grady Hendrix's writing. It's so quirky, and he writes great characters, and he writes great villains, because you absolutely just despise these adults who should know better and they treat these teenage girls horribly. He's really good with that. But also, like, he writes these like really weird sequences that, like, I don't know how to explain it. If you haven't read Grady Hendrix, like, you should give his books a chance. And I think this is a great starter book for Grady Hendrix because it was really easy to get into. The pacing is really good. Like, it's a long book, but it doesn't feel like a long book. And while it is horror, I don't think it's like very scary horror. It's more like the awfulness of the situation. I would say it's more like the reformatory and stories like that, where the horror, the real horror, is the real things happening, the people in the story, and not so much the supernatural element, even though there is a supernatural element, you know what I mean? And it is a little bit disturbing and unsettling in places. There is, I want to tell you, going in, like, trigger warning for a very descriptive, traumatic birth sequence. Like, I was so uncomfortable reading it. Like, I clenched up my whole body. Like, it was just uncomfortable. But I still gave it 5 stars. And then the last book I read in that video was Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. I have been so excited for this. I read Bloodmarked back in February, anticipating the release of Oathbound. And I finally got to pick it up, and it was so good. It was so good. Okay, so I don't know how to talk about this book because it's the 3rd book in a series and obviously full of spoilers. so I can't really tell you the plot or what was happening, but I can tell you that if you enjoyed Legendborn and Bloodmarked, that you will absolutely enjoy Oathbound. It is exactly what you want it to be. I love this series for the characters. I adore Bree. She is so dynamic of a character. She is very spontaneous. She is very spontaneous in her decision making. She's very much like, I'm gonna do the thing and think it through later. And that is often what gets her into trouble. But this book was a lot of that, and it was also heavy on romance, I would say, in this one, more so than other books previously. I would say Legendborn has a strong romance element. There's a romance happening throughout the series, like with their little love triangle we have going on, but I feel like this was more heavily focused on relationship stuff. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this book in particular was in both Legendborn and Bloodmarked, we are only seeing everything through Bree. And in this book, we have some other perspectives happening. So we get to see some other character perspectives. And that is always great. So I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And then let's talk about my reread of The Hunger Games. I'm just going to go through this very briefly. I literally read this immediately after Sunrise on the Reaping because I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to move on yet. I was really worried that this book was going to put me in a reading slump, and it almost did. But I read The Hunger Games again to like ease myself out of it. And I really want to go back and read and reread Catching Fire and Mockingjay, but I don't know when I'll have time to do that. But I was specifically reading it again to kind of like look for details about Haymitch that might, like, you know what I mean? Like, I wanted to see if my reading of Sunrise would affect my reread of The Hunger Games, and I would say it did. There were definitely moments that I went, oh, I see something here that I might not have caught otherwise. And like, Suzanne Collins is really good at like going through those moments and like pulling little pieces from them to add to her books. I need to go back and do the other 2 books in the series because I feel like Catching Fire in particular is going to be so like full of moments that are going to be reflecting differently based on Sunrise. But I gave it 5 stars, of course, because it's Hunger Games. Then I reread Nestlings, and I read that because that's a book my husband is reading this in April. I choose a book for him each month. It's a little project we're doing, a little book club we have going on where I am getting him to read my 5-star reads. Not all of them, obviously, because that would get overwhelming, but I'm choosing books for him that I think he might like that I have also given 5 stars. And the book that I chose for him in April was Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. So I got to reread it so we could talk about it. And I actually went and annotated it this time. It is full of tabs. I underlined in a book. I haven't quite worked myself up to highlighters yet, because that scares me still, but I underlined in pencil in a book. Who am I? It's growth, I think. But this book was so good. Like, I loved it the first time, loved it even more the second time. This is a story about a couple in New York City who have just suffered this really traumatic experience giving birth to their first child. Anna paralyzed herself basically during the labor, and so she's not just dealing with the normal post-traumatic stress of giving birth, but she's also dealing with this horrific experience of being paralyzed and like losing the ability to do a lot of the things that she took for granted. And so she's dealing with that. Her husband is dealing with like being the caretaker and not being very good at that. And they win this lottery to go live in this amazing historical apartment building in the city where typically only wealthy people get to live there, but they offer a really great deal to less privileged people. And so they go to this apartment and immediately see a lot of red flags, but decide it's still like worth the experience. So they end up moving in and things start happening. And this is a story about like vampire-like beings, and it's so good. It's very Jewish, which I'd never experienced before. Like, this is maybe the first time I'd ever read a book, a horror novel, that was Jewish. If you know of any other Jewish horror, I would absolutely love to know about it, because I feel like that is a very lacking thing. Like, I feel like we need more of that. Like, we have so much trauma. Why are we not using it for horror instead of just writing endless books about the Holocaust? Like, I want some Jewish horror. Like, this book was excellent. I loved it just as much the second time. Discussions that my husband and I do are for channel members only, so if you want to get in on that, please join my channel. Sign up to be a channel member. It's $5.99 a month, and you get access to extra videos. You get to see all my content early. We have a Discord group where we get to chat, and I have a book club for seasonal reads, so it's a good deal. And you get to hear my husband's thoughts about Nestlings and other books that we've read together, like Project Hail Mary. Also, he's reading, a little sneak peek, he's reading The House on the Cerulean Sea this month, so if that's a book you loved, like me, you might want to become a channel member so you can see what he thought of it. I read Talking to My Daughter About the Economy by Yanis Varoufakis. This is a book from Build Your Libraries Level 12. I needed to reread it and see if I still wanted to keep it in the economics portion of the curriculum, because I'm sort of revamping that, and I decided I will be keeping it. It actually fits better, I think, with the book I'm currently using as the spine. But this is like a pretty straightforward, like, it's a father like explaining how the economy works to his daughter, and it's told in like these essays where he, like, I love how he uses mythology and storytelling to kind of help like explain, because that's definitely how I feel like I learn best is through story. So I thought it's just a really great way to explain things to teens, and I'm definitely keeping it in the curriculum, and I gave it 4 stars. I read The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This was my 5-star predictions book in April, and I have a full video if you want to go see my full thoughts on that. But I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It was a redeeming book, because the last 2 months my 5-star predictions were both DNFs, and I was becoming concerned. So I read The Hacienda. I was very anxious about it. I waited to the end of the month, but I ended up loving it. This is a gothic horror story about a woman who marries for status and finds out that her husband is maybe not who she thought he was. The home that she had hoped to make something out of is maybe not what she thought it was going to be. This book is compared to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I could definitely see the parallels to the stories, but I think this is a really solid gothic horror. If you love gothic anything, I think you'll enjoy this. But I especially enjoyed the fact that it's historical. I'm a sucker for anything historical, and I really enjoyed this book a lot. Like I said, I have a whole full video if you want to go check out my thoughts there. But I gave it 5 stars, and I'm very, very happy about that. Another reread, I think I actually had 3 rereads this month. Did I say 2? I had 3, because my daughter and I finished reading Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. This was our read aloud. She has thoughts, but I absolutely loved my time in this world. I'm still hoping I can convince her to carry on, but she's ready to move on. She doesn't want to read The Toll next, and I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? But I'm hoping I can talk her into it. But this is the second book in the Arc of the Scythe series, and I feel like this is my favorite story in the series, because so much happens. Like, there's so much going on. I loved Scythe but I love Thunderhead so much more because it just like expands the world so much. Like you get to learn about unsavories, you get new characters like Grace and Tolliver, you get to see like more in depth about what's going on with the Scythedom. There's a whole the whole end of the book, like the last, I would say 100 pages is just bonkers, off the wall, like stuff is just happening. And it's absolute chaos and I love it. So that was an easy 5 stars. Regina has thoughts. We'll talk more about that when we get to our wrap up at the end of our year and talk about what we read together and her ranking. But she doesn't like it as much as I do. We'll just leave it there. So that's everything I read in April. I had a really solid reading month. I'm very excited going into May. I have so many things to read this month that I'm really looking forward to, and I'm expecting it to be another really good reading month. So let me know down below in the comments, what was your favorite read in April? I think if I have to pick, my favorite book in April is going to be Sunrise on the Reaping. Like I had so many choices here and they were all so good. But I think based sheerly on how much I've thought about it and how much I anticipated it, I'm going to say Sunrise on the Reaping is probably going to end up being my favorite book of the whole year. But for now, I'm going to say it was my favorite book in April. I hope you guys had a great reading month and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.